Hi there, this is Dr. Gary making good bosses into great leaders with compassionate accountability. Welcome again to another in our series of training videos, this time on performance management. I'm here with my good friend, Larry Rosenberg, the guru, the expert on performance
Right.
management, right, Larry? I mean, we're gonna do this thing. So
Yeah.
what,
I have some feedback for you, if it's
oh,
okay, if I can share some feedback with you. Because
sure.
what
I'm
you've always told me, Gary,
what?
feedback is a gift.
Do I need to take notes? Yeah.
Yeah, you might.
Why aren't I feeling like I'm getting a gift right now?
I don't know. We're going to talk about that. But let me share the feedback with you, if
Oh,
you don't
okay.
mind.
Go ahead.
So,
Hit me with it. Hit me
yeah.
with it.
So you and I got together. It was about 2 weeks ago, and we recorded our first training session, right? And I saw the final product.
Yeah.
So I know that you spent a ton of time editing that because I know how I felt after we recorded it. Like, oh my God, this thing's really not going to be that great. And when I saw the final product, I actually thought it was rather good, and I received some positive feedback as well. So what it did was, I think, produced really good quality videos, good training, and then made me feel a little bit more comfortable coming into today to record this one. So I wanted you to know it was about that, and great job.
Oh,
And
thank
the
you.
impact, I think, was really good. So
I appreciate that. And now you're going to give me the feedback sandwich and tell me the bad stuff.
the other shoe, yeah. So there is no other shoe. Um,
Oh,
and
okay.
and this
That doesn't happen very often.
did this to you on purpose. This happened to me. I worked at Genworth with it. My boss was Brian, and I'm out in Cube land, and he comes by and he says, "Hey, Larry, I've got some feedback for you. Will you come into my office? This is going to be really interesting." Didn't look forward to going into his office. Went into his office, and he pretty much did what I just did with you. Is he explained the situation, what he noticed about what I did, and the impact it had on the organization, and it was all positive. And then I said what you said, and what? But waiting for the other shoe. He's like, that's it. Keep up the good work. I walked out of his office, a little puzzled still, but I felt pretty good. And it took me a while. And then after a while, when Brian would say, "Hey, I've got some feedback for you," I was like, "Woohoo! What did I do great now?" So,
Yeah. So why do you think that is? Why do we, when somebody says, I've got some feedback for you, we all automatically go to the negative.
I bet we don't tend to get positive feedback that much.
Mm.
So we keep records. And when someone says, "I have feedback for you," more times than not, it is on the negative side. Okay. So we're trained. We've been trained by our past. Two, if we did get positive feedback, it was probably one of those attaboys, pat on the back. "Hey, I saw you in the meeting yesterday. Really nice job. Way to go." You're like, cool. And then you don't really know exactly what behavior that you did that caused the success and what the success looked like, what the impact was to your boss, to a colleague, to a client, because there was no formality to it. So you forget those, they don't stick.
Yeah, and without the specificity of it, you don't really have a good feeling about it. It's just kind of good information, but you don't feel like, oh wow, I did a great job.
You
But you always
gotta,
have that bad feeling when you get the other side of the feedback, right?
yes. And the bad feeling stays for a long time.
Mm.
Anyone get a performance review? Here's 5 things you did great. And here's a thing that maybe not great. You come home. How was your day? "I got this performance. They didn't think I did a good job in this." It's the way our mind, it's a fixed mindset. It's the way our ego is set up. It's very fragile, and it seems to want to latch onto those things that we're not so great at.
So okay, so since words are so important in leadership, we talk about this all the time, how important words are in leadership and why we've shifted like our definition of leadership from an influencing process to a relationship building process, right? These words are so important. How can we change the way we look at this? Because what are you saying? We're not going to give people feedback. We're not going to tell them the negative stuff or the things that they need to improve on. What are we going to call it if we're not calling it feedback?
Yeah. So, and of all the words you said, so feedback, I like that word. Okay. That is neutral. It's gotten a little bit of a stigmatism to it. Negative, I don't love that word.
Hmm.
Um, I've heard criticism. In fact, I've heard people say constructive criticism.
Oh yeah. Got
And,
some constructive criticism for you, Larry.
and then I basically say, and I have some jumbo shrimp for you too, because it's just another oxymoron, right? um, so I like, well, simple words are plus and delta.
Hmm.
Plus is what went well and what you should keep leveraging. Delta is something that could change, right? And in fact, think about the three questions, which we'll get to later, that we've been using all throughout the course. What could I do differently going forward? What might I change going forward? I've heard plus also called affirming feedback, and then maybe developmental or reconstructive. So at the end of the day, it is I'm moving in a particular direction. Don't like the word criticism, don't like the word negative, because they're trigger words. And what happens when we're triggered?
So how about if we get rid of the word feedback entirely? How about if we look, what have we been spending months learning how to do? We've got professional coaches, we've learned peer coaching. How about we call it performance coaching instead? How about we shift the paradigm on this? What do you think?
I think it's more accurate and it fits in with everything we're doing. So that is exactly what we're trying to do. We are coaching our colleagues, our staff on improving their performance because that's what we all want to do. We all want to get better.
So how would you suggest that we do this performance coaching? What do you think? What can we teach our students today about this process of performance coaching?
So we all know how we feel when we might be receiving coaching or receiving feedback.
Oh, just like I did when you said you had a gift for me, right? You had some feedback, and I'm like, oh boy, and I
Right.
get that feeling. Yeah.
So I'm thinking people listening to this might still be, hey, you need to go give feedback. It's opportunity to give. What might you be thinking then? What if some of my staff are a little touchy? Like I'm going to say something, and they're just going to go off, right? They're just going to come back and argue, get defensive, and get angry. And I might think, oh my gosh, words are so important. What if I pick the wrong word and that sets them off? So there's fear associated with that. And so
Yeah, and this anxiety that you feel going into it has a lot to do with the anxiety you feel when somebody else is giving you feedback over the years. It's seldom a really positive experience, a great experience that you have, a good feeling experience. The first few times I had to give some performance feedback, I'm thinking about when I received feedback that was on the negative side or constructive criticism. I'm like, how do I do this in a way that doesn't make the person anxious and upset? And I didn't know how to do it.
right, because you remembered such strong emotions being on the receiving end, and you didn't see any good models. Here's how we start to rationalize and say, do I really need to say anything? Is it that important? It's a lot easier for me to not have the conversation than to go in the conversation and have a very high chance of screwing it up.
It's not that big a deal.
Pick your battles.
Any excuse I can have to not give the feedback.
Right. Right. So all of these are the reasons why we tend to not want to receive it. We tend to not want to give it. And therefore, this is a fairly big gap. We've both alluded to the word mindset before. What are your thoughts on how a growth mindset fits into this whole performance coaching?
Oh, well, first of all, I think one of the things that we talk about with coaching is really being clear about what your intent is.
Mhm.
And performance coaching has to do with trying to improve the person's capabilities by starting understanding where they're at, what they're doing, and how can I help? So I think the mindset is for me is almost having the expectation of the choice to have a growth mindset, which means that we're going to be open to learning. And if it's performance coaching, we're going to ask some questions to help the person learn and then help them improve their capabilities in those areas that are needed.
Intention and growth, right? They're learning, they're getting better. There's no judgment against they should have been a certain way or should be here. It's here's where we are. How do we get a little bit better every day? So we talked about this plus delta for us to feel like we're getting a balance. So the right balance of positive and delta. We actually need a 4-to-1 ratio. So for every 4 positives and we get 1 delta, we call that balanced. maybe I need to step up and give a little bit more or a lot more positive feedback going forward. And so to me, it's a magic formula for setting up for success, a growth mindset, which is a good intent, a history of giving positive feedback, when deserved and when appropriate. Those two things will then set the foundation, set sort of the fertile ground for a performance coaching conversation.
So let's get clear. I think people know what the positive side is, but we're changing the vocabulary. So let's get clear about what you mean by a delta.
Yes, one of our colleagues, Bill, calls it coaching the gap, a noticeable gap in performance, which is the standard, right? The expectation was X, and what I noticed was Y, which was less than X. Something you didn't get the result that you expected, you didn't notice the behavior that you expected. And I've used the word expected twice now. And fortunately, we've covered setting clear expectations. And so if you set clear expectation on the front end, that's another thing that will help you have a good performance coaching conversation going forward, because that won't be an issue, which is, oh, I didn't really know that you expected it to be that way.
So when you look at the whole realm of expectations, then you're talking about something, a goal that was missed, a project that didn't turn out the way you expected it to, and there's going to be a review on that. There's a behavior, let's say, that's not consistent with the values of the organization. So there's a conversation about what the behavior was and what the expected behavior was, and a conversation about that gap. So this is all of what you're talking about, right?
Yes, well said.
How do you conduct an effective coaching performance activity?
Glad you asked. This model is going to be very familiar. Really, the three questions, but maybe a little bit deeper. And so we'll call it the SAS model. So it stands for situation, analysis, and solution. And each of these has a couple steps. So situation is understanding where we are now. And there's 3 steps to that. And step 1 is really the specifics and the context. Step 2 is sharing the behaviors observed. Step 3 is the impact.
Describe for me a typical scenario under situation, because as I understand this, when you talk about behavior, observable behavior, as the coach, you're going to give them some perspective. You're not just asking them all the questions. So this performance coaching isn't just about asking questions. It's also about giving your perspective on things, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. So sometimes you'll ask questions, and if they are unaware of something that you are aware of, you're going to have to share it with them. So so for situation, it could be so we're in the meeting yesterday with some of the superintendents and the clients. What I noticed was you looked at your phone several times, and then one time they called on you to ask you your opinion, and you really hesitated, and they had to repeat the question, and then you did answer it. And so the impact was client might not have as much faith or confidence in you, because they did come up to me after the meeting and said, this, so and so, are they with it? Were they, do they think this was important? What are your thoughts?
I want to make sure we understand. Connecting the behavior that you observed, you were on your phone.
Yes.
And when asked a question, you hesitated, did not have an answer.
Right.
My assumption is that you weren't paying attention. Is that a fair assumption? And of course, in a situation like that, 99 times out of, yeah, you're right, I wasn't paying attention. It's pretty obvious. But you're going to confirm the assumption that you're making that he wasn't paying attention, right?
Right. And then you may
And the impact on the customer. Yeah.
Right. Impact of the customer, and then and the impact that they might not be aware of. And then of course you can roll into the analysis, which is more about what's going on. And it could be something like a family member was in the hospital and so forth. And had I known ahead of time, we could have said that at the beginning, like, hey, here's something, they're going through something pretty serious right now. I might have to check my phone. And then everybody like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Family first. A lot of times we do need to share what we've seen, be objective, share the impact that they might not be aware of, and then ask the right questions and listen, truly listen.
Yeah, so we call this performance coaching, but not in the vernacular of only asking questions. This is a conversation about performance.
Step two, okay, which is analysis, is really remember way back when we talked about delegation and we said to find the right person, they had to have the resources, the capability. Um, they had to be motivated and willing. So it's willing, able, and basically everything at their disposal to do the job. So step two, this analysis is looking at what were the contributing factors that either led to the success or led to the miss, right? The gap. And so looking at those things, was there enough time and so forth and so on. So a lot of questioning to find out kind of what went wrong. And so it could be corrected going forward. And then there's solution, which is, well, we have one, maybe two things to correct, course correct, if you will. The first is, and let's say we're using the example, we missed something. We didn't put the roof on right. There was a safety violation. There was miss to a client, any of these types of things. So how do we correct that now? What do we do to basically deliver what we said we would deliver? So that's the fixing this particular situation. And we mutually agree on what those steps look like. The second part is, okay, now everything that we've learned about this, unless this was totally a one-off, is there something systemic that we can fix? So maybe it was a miscommunication between you and I. And it's not the first time that that's happened. And so what can we do to improve our communication process so that this, I won't say never happens again, but we reduce the chance that it happens in the future?
Yeah,
And
so it's what I always talk about with there's two problems to solve, right? It's the immediate and the long term.
yes,
The immediate and the systemic. And in some cases, you may not have the authority to solve the systemic problem. So you may need to bring that to somebody's awareness. Your job may be to solve the immediate problem if you're still in the middle of the work that you're doing, the task, the project, or whatever. So there's two separate ways of seeing this. It's at the end of completion of work is what can we learn from it, right? Well, what can we do differently next time, or what can we do better? Or we're in the middle of it, what's
right.
going well, what's not going well, and what can we do about that? So Larry, let's try to look at kind of a hypothetical project, if you would, and how we would ask some specific questions, some coaching questions around the performance of a project that, let's say, it's halfway done and you're my boss and you go, Gary, let's have a review of this and we're going to do some performance coaching.
Well, I like to set the context. So in regards to the ABC project, what do you think's going well right now?
Well, I think so far we're about halfway through the project and we're 45% on schedule. So we're just a little bit behind schedule, maybe a few days, but I think that we can pick that up as we go forward. We're right on budget as expected. We're meeting the specifications that the client was looking for. And I think we're in good shape.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I mean, kudos on the budget. Wanted to dig a little deeper that when you say 45% to schedule, tell me a
Yeah,
little bit more
so
about that.
this project is about a 2-month project. Okay, so in 2 months we have about 40 days of actual work that we're doing, and we should be 20 days of completed work right now. And we've got like 19.
For a minute, I thought it was 45%, as in you were more than halfway behind. So,
Oh
right?
no,
So
I should be at 50% done. I'm at 45% done, not 45% of 100%. Yeah, I got it. Yeah, glad you
so
asked that clarifying question.
yes, me too. Um, okay, and it sounds like you recognize some of the things that have come up that have gotten in the way, and you have a plan around attacking that.
Well, yeah, I do. And, as you know, you forced me to jump into this with only half a crew in the first few days. And that's really what caused us to be behind. And you told me basically to suck it up. It's too bad. Just take care of it. And I'm doing the best I can.
Are those the words that I used?
Those are the exact words that you use.
All
It's
right.
not my fault. It's not my fault that we were a few people short in the beginning. It's just the way the crews fell together. And we'll try to pick it up.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I mean that the performance coaching that we're doing right now isn't about blame. It really is lessons learned. What can we collectively do differently going forward? What's going well, and it sounds like there's a lot going well. And so one piece I'm hearing is, hey, I kind of started without as many people as I needed to begin with, and
Yeah,
so
I didn't
that's
have all the resources, but we'll figure out a way to pick it up.
you said you'll figure out a way. Do you have a way? I mean, there might be something that we can do. I just want to make sure that you're set up for success and we bring this thing in on time. And from an kind of an impact standpoint, this is a pretty critical. And it seems like it's a 2-month job, which isn't large. However, the client we're working for, we do a really good job here. This could open up some significant business going forward. So with these tight timeframes, you're given an opportunity to really be a hero and bring this thing in. And I just want to make sure you're set up for success.
Yeah, I think with the schedule that we've set forward, we'll be okay. If we need to work a couple of weekends to pick it up, we might have to, which will of course affect our labor budget. But I think we can make it up in the materials and some of the things that we've done so far. So overall in the budget, we'll be within 5% of the budget. I'll keep you informed as we go through it and see if we can find some other ways to cut some costs.
How else can I help?
If I need some extra people, I'll let you know in a couple of weeks as we're getting closer towards the end. There might be 1 or 2 people that I could use, and if we can do that, I could have a couple of people doing some work on the project and do it at straight time rather than overtime on the weekend. So I'll let you know at the end of next week what that looks like and if I can get another person or two.
Okay. Yeah, and I just know the way that we kind of do our back office process. If you can let me know that by Thursday and which specific role you're looking for, I stand a much better chance of being able to come up with somebody. Well,
Sounds like a plan.
okay, good. So in this case, we covered the current situation. We talked about the specifics, what particular project it was. We really didn't get too much into behaviors. It was more about results in this particular case. Um, what I do wanted to talk about specifically, um, when we do talk about behaviors, this is an area where it's easy to go astray. This is a high risk area. And the way I look at it is only observable behaviors. If a video camera can capture it, you can share it. It's very easy for us to climb the ladder of inference and to begin to make assumptions about what we're seeing and to begin to make judgments. So if, for instance, if Gary was late for work, let's say I noticed he was late for work 3 out of 5 days this week. If I say, I mean, you hardly ever show up for work on time or you don't seem to care about your job, that's a judgment. If I said, I noticed that the foreman was on site before you at 8 o'clock on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, what's going on? Can you help me understand?
So when we're talking about performance coaching, let's wrap this thing up here because you have this simple model, SAS, situation, analysis, solutions. You got this simple model that has some nuances to it and asking the 3 questions, right? What's going well? What do we need to do differently or better? How can we help each other out? What other analysis do we need? And then come up with an action plan. It's a simple model of performance coaching. Where it becomes complicated is when we bring in all of these questions of coaching, which we're going to practice in the mini camp. We're going to learn about these different questions that we can ask at the 3 parts of situation, analysis, and solution. When I think about this, I think of the situation and analysis being an interactive part of this model where it's going to go back and forth by asking questions, by using your emotional intelligence, by using your communication styles and your Myers-Briggs profiles and the person you're talking to. All of this stuff comes into play. And then we didn't really even talk that much about what happens if I get really pissed off when Larry asks me to do something one more time and he tells me to suck it up.
Yes.
Doesn't do good, as I've said many, many times. You can't solve an emotional problem with a logical solution. So what do you do, Larry?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because there's 2 types of common behavior that we see when someone has been triggered. And so one is the I'm really pissed off, right? Because it's fight or flight. And so in some of the books, fight or flight looks like silence or violence. So yeah, so Gary is demonstrating the flight now. He's done checked out. So if he's really if he's really angry at the beginning, like anything else, you acknowledge like, hey, I totally get where you're coming from. I see that you're angry. What about this is causing that, or what are your thoughts? I really want to know what you're thinking. So it's a two-step process. What I did was acknowledge that their feelings are valid. And two, I asked them an open-ended question. In neuroscience world, the blood will then fire over out of the limbic system into the prefrontal cortex because, oh, I have something to think about now. So that's your, like, in case of emergency, break glass, acknowledge, ask an open-ended question. And then, of course, pay attention to the answer, and the dialogue continues. So the whole idea is to stay engaged in the conversation and keep it going.
And I would agree with that most of the time. And that's the thing about this vagueness is most of the time, stay engaged in the conversation, or you might take 5.
Give them the time to chill out, walk outside. Had a guy who was coaching said, I had to walk in my truck, smoke a cigarette, drink a Red Bull. Then I felt better. Of course, I'm scratching my head going, I can't imagine how that's helping, but you took the time.
Well, Larry, thanks a lot for sharing this model for performance coaching, which we're rebranding from performance feedback or any other of those words that we use. And we'll spend some time learning more about this when we get together. And here's the thing that I want to highlight is all the things that we've been learning for the last 6 months are coming together in understanding how we can manage performance, lead performance with coaching. Coaching is the combination of the ability to have these conversations with people through questions, but also applying emotional intelligence and personality styles, communication styles, and awareness of the relationship at the moment within the context of the work that you're doing. All of that in a matter of seconds. So this takes practice. And one of the things that's really important about this, I think, is that performance coaching needs to be done at the appropriate time in the appropriate way with a person that at the moment has the ability to be able to have that conversation. So be aware of the context that you're in that moment through your emotional intelligence to really read whether now is a good time or not. But here's the key. Don't put it off. Don't make an excuse that says it's not so bad or, it's not a big deal or all the excuses that we said before. Learn how to approach this. And maybe with some practice in your cohorts, you can practice with the people within your cohorts and say, I'd like to practice performance coaching with you right now in a role play that I have to do with somebody else next week. So let me practice with you. And as you practice this, you'll get better and better and better at picking up the nuances and the complexity of performance coaching. You got any final words, Larry?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw one more P in there, prepare. So I would jot down situation, behavior, impact. I would write that down on a piece of paper first before I practice. So I know what specific things I want to talk about, and then practice with my cohort, and then go out and try it. And to your point, always, hey, is this a good time for coaching? And then if they say no, what would be a good time? So
there you go.
No one's off the hook.
That's a great question. I like that. Let's set a deadline. When can we talk? That's awesome. And preparation, that's really a great some great advice right there, is to be able to write your thoughts down and know, what's your intention, what are you trying to accomplish, how you're trying to build the relationship so you can achieve your goals together with compassionate accountability, our definition of leadership. Well, thanks, Larry, for another fine example of training for our leadership candidates. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I'm Dr. Gary, making good bosses into great leaders with compassionate accountability. Just beware if I give you a call and I say, I've got a little feedback for you.